The galaxy thought humans walked alone. At the summit, an alien general rose to his full, monstrous height and sneered at the lone human delegate. "You come here without armies, without fleets, without strength. Who protects you, fragile one?" The human did not flinch. He only leaned forward and whispered, "My bodyguard is right behind you." The chamber froze. The alien turned, and what he saw was only the beginning of why humanity is never truly alone. Before we unravel this confrontation at the Galactic Summit, take a moment to like this story and subscribe. It helps us bring you more tales where humanity stands tall among the stars. And trust me, you won't want to miss the ending of this one. The Galactic Concordium was unlike anything Earth had ever seen, a vast cathedral of light suspended in orbit over a neutral star. Representatives from every known species gathered here, their forms filling the tiers of the council chamber, voices murmuring in 100 languages. At the center stood the human delegation, small, unarmed, fragile-looking among the towering reptilians, insectoids, and beings of plasma and stone. Humanity's arrival was still fresh, still doubted. Earth was a backwater world barely admitted into galactic politics, and most saw them as curiosities, soft-fleshed, short-lived, a species tolerated more than respected. But humans had come with words, not weapons, diplomats, not warriors. They spoke of trade, peace, and cooperation. And yet, beneath the ceremony, the tensions simmered. Some empires wanted humanity crushed before they could grow dangerous. That day, one of them decided to make a point. The alien general rose from his seat. He was from the Karzul Dominion, a race bred for conquest. H's carapace gleamed under the council lights, and his mandibles clacked with disdain as he stalked toward the human delegate. "You speak of peace," the general hissed, voice amplified through the chamber. "But you bring no strength, no force to back your words. You come naked, trusting, weak. Do you not understand where you stand? Here, power speaks louder than hope." The chamber murmured, some alien eyes glittering with anticipation. The human delegate did not move. He met the general's gaze, unblinking, his hands resting calmly on the table before him. "I do not stand alone," the human said softly. His voice carried clear and steady across the chamber. "My bodyguard is right behind you." The general paused, sneered, and turned, expecting armored soldiers, a squad of Marines, perhaps even hidden weapons. Instead, he saw a wolf. Its eyes gleamed amber, fur bristling like fire, teeth catching the chamber's light. Silent, watchful, waiting. But before the general could laugh, before the council could dismiss it as theatrics, the human delegate leaned forward and whispered words that made the blood of every predator in the room run cold. No, not him. The pack. The silence that followed the human's words was not ordinary silence. It was a silence that listened. A silence that carried weight, as if every creature in the chamber instinctively knew there was more to those words than bravado. The wolf stood there, muscles taut, amber eyes burning into the alien general's carapaced frame. Yet the human's voice echoed louder than any growl. The pack. But the aliens didn't understand what those words meant. They had never lived through Earth's long winters, never felt the eyes of predators in the darkness, never run through forests with creatures who had learned not just to hunt with humans, but to live for them. To most species of the galaxy, companions were slaves, pets were luxuries, partners were unthinkable, and yet humanity had built its history alongside predators, wolves, dogs, horses, even birds trained to deliver messages across continents. Humanity had never been alone, because life itself had chosen to walk beside them. And when humans first reached the stars, they hadn't come empty-handed. In the great cryo-vaults of their colony ships, tucked between seed banks and cultural archives, lay the genetic memory of their companions. Wolves. bred strong. Dogs, loyal and clever. A lineage shaped over thousands of years, refined not for war, not for domination, but for trust. It had shocked the first alien biologists who encountered them. "You created predators that follow your orders?" they had asked in disbelief. But the humans had smiled and shaken their heads. "No," they had answered, "we didn't create them, we chose each other." And so the pack lived again among the stars, stronger, faster, sharper than ever before, adapted to alien worlds as much as humans themselves. They weren't tools, they weren't weapons, they were family, and family was something no alien in that chamber could quite understand, until they saw the way the wolf's eyes never left the human's back. The general sneered, hiding unease. "One beast? You expect me to be impressed?" The wolf's growl rumbled low, primal, vibrating through the chamber floor. But the human delegate didn't flinch. His eyes glinted with something calm, unshakable, as if daring the general to take one more step. Because behind those words, the pack, lay a promise the galaxy wasn't ready to comprehend. The chamber shifted uneasily. Delegates who had minutes ago dismissed the human as fragile and weak now leaned forward in wary silence. The general, massive, armored, bristling with weapons that could level cities, hesitated. His claws twitched, his mandibles clicked, but his gaze flicked nervously to the wolf. One predator meeting another. The wolf didn't move, didn't blink. It didn't need to. Its presence alone spoke of something older than the council itself. For the first time, the councilors realized the balance of power in the chamber had changed, not through weapons, not through numbers, but through something else. The human delegate finally rose from his seat, every movement deliberate. He wasn't tall by galactic standards. His frame was ordinary, his skin fragile compared to the exoskeletons, hides, and scaled armor of the species around him. But when he spoke, his words cut sharper than blades. "You misunderstand," the human said softly, addressing the general but speaking to the entire hall. "The wolf is not here to protect me. He is here to remind you." "Remind us of what?" hissed the general, forcing bravado into his tone. The human's eyes narrowed. That humanity never walks alone. That every world we've stepped on, every storm we've endured, every night we've survived, we've done it with others at our side. Not chains, not slaves, partners. And those partners remember. The wolf let out a low growl that reverberated like distant thunder. A counselor from the Ailey, a winged species known for their cold diplomacy, leaned toward her neighbor and whispered, "They cannot mean there are more. Not here. Not in this chamber." Her neighbor swallowed hard. "They mean everywhere. Where there is one, there are many. Always." The murmur spread like fire. The counselors began to understand. The pack wasn't just the wolf, it wasn't just dogs, it wasn't even just animals. It was the very principle of humanity itself, this strange, terrifying instinct to build bonds with the most unlikely of allies, and in doing so multiply their strength beyond measure. The general's mandibles clicked furiously. He raised his weaponized forearm with a hiss. "I will not be cowed by fairy tales of animals." The wolf took a single step forward, teeth bared, muscles coiled like steel cables. The human didn't even raise his hand to command it. He simply looked at the general with the weight of someone who knew the ending of this story before it even began. "My bodyguard is not behind you," the human repeated, voice like iron. "Not him, the pack." And for the first time, several delegates swore they heard something in the distance, scratching claws, padded steps, faint howls carried on no wind at all. At first, the council thought it was imagination, a trick of the human's words, a phantom echo seated by fear. But then it grew louder. Claws, hundreds of them, echoing not from the corridors or the doors, but from everywhere. The acoustics of the chamber twisted, amplifying the sound until it pressed against the delegates' chests like a second heartbeat. Howls rose next. Not singular, not uniform, but layered. some sharp and shrill, others deep and mournful, a chorus of predators from across 1,000 worlds, wolves, dogs, jackals, creatures whose ancestors had once walked beside humans and never forgotten the bond. Counselors gripped their seats in horror, their eyes darting to exits that suddenly felt far too narrow. The general's mandibles clicked wildly. His weapon arm shook, scanning the chamber for threats that refused to reveal themselves. This is illusion! Trickery! But his voice wavered, betraying the terror chewing at the edges of his mind. The human delegate remained perfectly calm. He hadn't moved, hadn't spoken since those words. The pack. It was as though he, too, was listening. Not summoning, not commanding, simply acknowledging. One by one, shapes began to stir in the shadows at the edges of the chamber. Eyes. Dozens of them. Yellow, green, blue, reflecting light like polished glass. Creatures padded silently into view, not just wolves, but forms alien and familiar alike. Great felines whose species had been extinct on Earth for centuries. Bird-like raptors whose talons clicked softly against the marble. Hulking reptilian quadrupeds from distant colonies, their throats vibrating with low growls. Every single one turned not to the human, but to the general. The chamber had grown cold. Counselors whispered among themselves in panic. They cannot all be here. They cannot travel the stars. This is not possible. The human finally broke the silence, his words spoken not with triumph, but with a quiet inevitability. You wanted to know what makes us dangerous. He gestured toward the gathering predators, the phantom army of loyalty and teeth. It isn't our weapons, it isn't our ships, it isn't even our will to fight. The wolf at his side lowered its head, ears pinned, growling like a storm-given flesh. It's this. We make pacts, and when one of us is threatened... The human's voice sharpened to steel. The universe learns how many stand behind us. The general staggered backward, armor scraping the chamber floor. His weapon arm flickered uncertainly, caught between fight and flight. But the pack did not move. They waited, perfectly still, letting the weight of their presence crush him. And for the first time in living memory, a warlord of his kind lowered his weapon, not because of superior firepower, but because of fear. The chamber should have been chaos. Leaders panicking, soldiers rushing to arms, alarms wailing, but instead, silence ruled. Every counselor felt it in their bones. The pack was not an illusion. The low growls reverberated through the very foundation of the hall, carrying the primal message of danger older than civilization itself. The general's weapon arm twitched again, but he did not raise it. He could not. His body betrayed him, instinct overriding pride. For all his race's military dominance, for all their machines of conquest, he was still prey when confronted with something so raw, so ancient. Then, a delegate from the feathered Thynar species whispered, her voice trembling, "Those aren't just predators. Look closer." All eyes turned. Among the glowing eyes and shifting shapes, other forms emerged. Not beasts, but people. Humanoids cloaked in shadows. Small frames of insectoids, towering reptilian bipeds, sleek aquatic morphs standing upright on mechanical exosuits. They were not monsters. They were members of species the Council knew well, and yet they bore the unmistakable aura of belonging. The human's voice carried again, soft and deliberate. Did you think our pack was made only of teeth and claws? You misunderstand us. Wherever humans go, we make bonds, we make family, and family does not walk away. The Thynar delegate leaned forward, feathers puffed in disbelief. You mean to say those species, have joined you? The human didn't nod, didn't boast. He simply let the sight answer. A towering reptilian ally stepped from the shadows, its scaled hand resting on the wolf's shoulders as though the two had known each other for centuries. An insectoid placed one many-fingered limb against the human's back in silent solidarity. A sleek, aquatic being hissed in a rhythm that was unmistakably a warning call, directed not at the human, but at the general. The council chamber trembled under the weight of realization. This was no illusion. This was no performance. The pack was not metaphor. It was literal. The general's mandibles clattered in desperation. Impossible. Your species is young. You lack the reach. The human cut him off, his calm now carrying the bite of command. Not young. Adaptable. Where you see rivals, we see companions. Where you see slaves, we see brothers and sisters. And where you see weakness, we build loyalty strong enough to outlast empires. A ripple of unease spread across the council. For in that moment they saw the truth. Humanity's power was not their technology, not their armies, but their relentless ability to bind others into something greater. A pack. The wolf raised its head and howled. The sound was joined seamlessly by the alien voices, the growls, the hisses, the clicks. A symphony of predators and people alike, united by one truth. The general stepped back again, his composure cracking, his voice a rasp. Then it is not just you I face. The human's eyes hardened. No, it never was. The silence that followed the pack's howl was not empty. It was heavy, charged, like the moments before a storm. Counselors shifted in their seats, their faces masks of unease and calculation. Some leaned forward, eyes wide with awe. Others shrank back, their minds already whispering of danger. It was the insectoid delegate who broke the silence first, his mandibles clacking with disbelief. This is dangerous. If humans can bind anyone to their cause, what is to stop them from binding all of us? His words cracked the fragile balance, and voices erupted in waves. They are a threat, shouted one. They are salvation, cried another. They bring predators into the heart of this chamber. They brought allies. You fool, don't you see the difference? The human remained still, his pack arrayed behind him, waiting. Not a flicker of fear passed over his face. He knew better than to interrupt. Let them argue. Let them show their true nature. The general, trembling but defiant, seized the moment. His voice carried above the others, raw and desperate. You see it now. The humans cannot be trusted. They weave webs, they spread lies, they infect loyalty where it does not belong. If we do not strike them down now, we will wake one day to find ourselves bound in chains of their making. The reptilian delegate slammed his clawed hand against the table, the force cracking the polished stone. His deep voice rumbled, low and thunderous. No. What you call chains, we call bonds. The humans did not enslave me. They stood by me when your armies burned my colony. They bled beside me when no one else would. Tell me, General, who was the predator that day? The chamber froze. The accusation hung heavy, undeniable. The general faltered, mandibles twitching. He tried to rally, but his authority slipped with every second of silence. Meanwhile, the human finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he placed both hands flat on the council table. His eyes swept the room, meeting each gaze in turn. You argue whether we are threat or salvation, but the truth is simpler. We are a mirror. When you stand against us, you see something to fear. When you stand with us, you see something worth protecting. The choice is not ours to make. It has always been yours. A murmur swept the chamber. Even those who distrusted him could not deny the weight of his words. The wolf growled softly, sensing the tension cresting. The pack's allies shifted as one, ready, though no one moved. The council was no longer unified. It teetered on the edge, between fear and admiration, between war and alliance. And in that fragile balance, every leader knew. What humanity represented could either shatter their fragile order or become the one force strong enough to hold it together. The storm had broken, and no one yet knew who would survive it. The council chamber dimmed as the great hall's ceiling shifted. The stars beyond revealed like 1,000 watching eyes. It was a symbolic gesture, the council's way of reminding every delegate that their decisions were made under the judgment of the galaxy itself. The presiding arbiter, a crystalline being whose body refracted the starlight, struck the gavel. Its voice resonated like chimes of glass. The matter is clear. A vote must be cast. Humanity's place among us, ally or adversary, shall be decided. A shiver ran through the room. This was no longer debate. This was survival. The human delegate leaned back in his seat, his expression unreadable. But his pack remained alert, each ally coiled like a spring, watching every flicker of movement from the general's faction. The arbiter gestured. "Those who stand with humanity, raise your seal." For a heartbeat, silence. Then, light. The reptilian delegate raised his claw, his seal glowing crimson. Beside him, a cluster of smaller civilizations lifted theirs in unison, like sparks igniting. "Those who oppose, raise your seal." The general thrust his arm high, his seal burning with defiance. Around him, the insectoids followed, as did several others swayed by fear more than conviction. The chamber pulsed with light, red against blue, fear against trust. And then, stalemate. The balance was nearly perfect, the room divided down the center. The fate of humanity, of the pack, of everything that had unfolded in this chamber, hung on the final few undecided voices. The arbiter's crystal form glittered, its voice trembling faintly. "The decision rests upon those yet to choose. Cast your vote." The delegates hesitated, sweat beading, mandibles twitching, claws tapping. The galaxy seemed to hold its breath. That was when the human stood. His chair scraped back, echoing in the silence. He didn't raise his seal. Instead, he spoke, calm, low, every word deliberate. "You ask yourselves whether to fear us or follow us. But I ask you this, when the storm comes, when the enemy is not in this chamber but beyond these walls, who will bleed beside you? Who will stand when every star burns against you? Who will not break?" He turned, extending his hand, not to the wolf, not to his allies, but to the empty air. And as if summoned, the pack moved. Not only the wolf, but the reptilian, the insectoid deserter, even others who had quietly stepped into humanity's orbit. They rose as one, crossing the chamber to stand at his side, not bound by fear, not chained by manipulation, but bound by choice. Gasps echoed, seals flickered in hesitation, and one by one the undecided began to raise theirs, toward the human. The general's mandibles clattered furiously, his voice breaking. "You fools! You cannot see what he is doing. This is not alliance, it is infection. You are surrendering your will." But his voice carried no weight now. The tide had shifted. The arbiter's gavel fell like thunder. The council has spoken. Humanity shall not be cast out. Humanity shall stand among us. The vote is sealed. The stars above flared, bathing the human and his pack in light. The chamber was decided, but the war of shadows between trust and fear was far from over. The arbiter's crystalline gavel still vibrated with finality when the general rose from his seat, towering above his supporters. His shadow stretched long across the chamber floor, a jagged silhouette cutting into the circle of starlight. "You think this vote settles the matter?" His voice thundered, mandibles snapping with rage. "You think a handful of weak-willed fools declaring humanity an ally makes them safe? The galaxy does not bend to votes. It bends to strength." A ripple of unease spread through the chamber. Delegates shifted nervously, seals dimming in their hands. Some clutched their robes, others looked to their guards, but no one moved. The human remained still, not a twitch, not a blink, only calm. The wolf at his side lowered its head, teeth just barely visible in the glow of the starlight. The reptilian ally stepped closer, scales bristling, eyes fixed on the general. The arbiter's voice chimed sharply. "General, the vote is binding. To defy it is to defy the council itself." The general laughed, a deep rumbling sound that rolled like thunder. "Then let me show this council what binding truly means." He lifted a claw, and in an instant, the chamber erupted. From the shadows above, camouflaged warriors leapt down, landing in a circle around the human delegate. Their armor shimmered, their blades glowing with a venomous light. Gasps filled the air. The chamber guards froze, uncertain. This wasn't just defiance, it was assassination in the council hall itself. The general sneered. "Let us see how long your pack holds, human." The human finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he straightened his jacket, stepped away from his chair, and placed a hand on the wolf's back. His voice carried, not loud, but sharp enough to cut through the chaos. "You still don't understand, do you?" he said. "You think the pack ends with me? That it's just these allies, this wolf, this moment, but you've made one mistake, General." He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every delegate, every witness. "You've shown them what fear looks like. Now I'll show them what unity feels like." The wolf growled low, a sound that crawled into every spine. The reptilian bared his teeth. The insectoid deserter clicked their blades together, and then others began to rise. Delegates who had never fought beside humans, who had never drawn a blade in this hall, suddenly stood shoulder to shoulder. The general's warriors hesitated. For the first time, their numbers didn't feel certain. And the human smiled. "You thought I only had one pack." The chamber pulsed, not with fear, but with something stronger. Resolve. The general's mandibles twitched. He gave the order. "Cut them down!" And the council chamber plunged into chaos. The chamber exploded into motion. Blades hissed from their scabbards, guards scrambled, and the general's assassins lunged forward like a tide of steel. But before they struck, a sound split the air. Low, resonant, primal. The wolf howled. It wasn't the cry of one beast. It was the signal of many. From the upper galleries, from the shadowed corridors, from places no alien ever thought to look, more shapes emerged. Wolves, sleek, fierce, eyes burning with loyalty. A dozen, then 2 dozen, flowing down the steps like living shadows, fangs gleaming under the council's starlight ceiling. The assassins froze mid-step. Their blades trembled. None had expected predators from Earth itself to stalk the very heart of galactic politics. The human delegate didn't raise a weapon. He simply gestured, calm as a conductor, as if this battle was not chaos but a symphony already written. The wolves leapt. They weren't alone. The reptilian ally roared, tail whipping like a club as he crashed into 2 assassins at once. The insectoid deserter moved with deadly precision, each strike of their blades cutting arcs of light. Other delegates, once divided by fear, now surged forward, emboldened, forming a living shield around the human. The general snarled. "This is madness. They're not soldiers. They're—" "A pack," the human interrupted, voice cold as iron. The chamber became a storm of motion. Wolves darted under alien strikes, snapping tendons and toppling armored bodies. Allied claws and blades joined the fray. Even unarmed delegates fought, their voices raised in defiance. And through it all, the human stood at the center, untouched, watching as chaos bent itself around him. Not by command, not by dominance, but by loyalty freely given. The assassins began to falter. Their formation broke. For every blade raised against the human, 3 more allies answered. The general's mandibles twitched with fury. He slammed a clawed fist onto the floor, shouting above the din. "Do you not see? This is not alliance, it is infection. He spreads like a plague." But his words carried no weight. Not when wolves tore through his loyalists. Not when allies bled side by side. Not when the sight of one human, unarmed, had reshaped the chamber into a battlefield where fear no longer ruled. The arbiter's crystal body rang with strain, its voice rising above the battle. "This chamber is sacred. End this, now." But the general did not stop. He raised his weapon, blade glowing with poisonous light, and charged the human himself. The wolves snarled, allies surged, but the human raised a hand. "Stand down," he said quietly. Every eye turned. Every motion froze. Even the general slowed, confused, blade quivering in his grip. And the human stepped forward, unarmed, into the storm. The general's weapon hummed with venomous energy as he bore down on the human. His armored bulk made the marble floor quake with each step. Every alien in the chamber watched, breath caught in their throats as the scene slowed into inevitability. The unarmed human against a titan of war. The wolves tensed, lips curled back, but the human's quiet command still held them in check. His allies strained against instinct, claws and blades half drawn, waiting for the order that never came. The human stood alone. The general sneered, mandibles clicking in amusement. "You call this strength, to die unarmed, to trust that others will bleed for you? That is weakness, human. That is delusion." The human's eyes never wavered. He stepped closer, closing the distance until the blade hovered just inches from his chest. His voice was low, steady, carrying through the silence like a thread of steel. "You mistake me, General. I don't need a weapon." The general barked a laugh, cruel and sharp. "Then you've already lost." The blade plunged forward, only to stop. The general's wrist trembled, his arm quivering. The weapon's edge pressed against the human's jacket but did not pierce. His mandibles clattered in disbelief as if unseen chains bound his strike. The human leaned in, his voice quiet enough that only the general could hear. Yet his words seemed to echo through the chamber. "Because you're not fighting me, General. You're fighting all of us. And no matter how strong you think you are, no creature, no army, no empire ever breaks the pack." The wolves howled in unison. Allies surged to their feet. The chamber walls seemed to tremble with the resonance of 1,000 voices raised in solidarity. The general staggered back, eyes wide. His blade flickered, dimming as his grip faltered. For the first time, fear cut through his arrogance. The arbiter's crystalline body chimed, sharp as a bell. "Enough! The council hall will not be a battlefield. General, your actions have stained your station. Guards, seize him." But the general roared, swiping his blade wildly to keep them at bay. "This is not over. You think your pack protects you now? The galaxy will learn the truth. The human contagion must be purged." He turned, slashing his way toward the exit, retreating not as a victor, but as a hunted beast. The human did not pursue. He stood calm, brushing the dust from his jacket as the chamber erupted into cries, some fearful, some joyous, but all shaken. The arbiter raised its gavel once more. "Order shall be restored. This session is not adjourned. Humanity's place among us remains sealed, but so too does the shadow of war." The human only whispered to himself, to his wolf, to the stars above. "Let him run. The pack will follow." The chamber's marble floor was stained with claw marks and the scorch of weapons. Delegates whispered furiously among themselves, their voices hushed but urgent, as if the walls themselves might remember their words. The general had fled, his loyalists scattering into the shadows. Yet his absence weighed heavier than his presence ever had. His defiance wasn't just a rebellion against the council, it was a promise of war. The arbiter's crystalline form shimmered, its voice strained but resolute. "Order has been violated. Blood has been spilled in this sacred hall. Humanity has proven its allies, but also its enemies. What happened here will echo far beyond these walls." The insectoid deserter, their mandibles clicking nervously, stepped closer to the human. "You realize what you've done?" they whispered. "The general will not stop. He will rally his armies. He will paint you as the corruptor, the infection, this." They gestured to the wolves, to the allies now standing shoulder to shoulder with humanity. "We'll terrify the galaxy as much as it inspires it." The human didn't argue. He only stroked the wolf's fur, eyes fixed on the ceiling where the stars shone like witnesses. "Then let them be terrified," he said softly. "Fear is the only language tyrants understand. And maybe, just maybe, it's the first step to teaching them respect." The reptilian ally stepped forward, his voice booming with pride. "No, not just respect, loyalty. You showed them today that the pack is more than wolves, more than humans. It is the choice to stand together. That cannot be undone." Across the chamber, undecided delegates stirred, their eyes no longer darting with uncertainty, but steady with conviction. Some approached the human, extending claws, mandibles, or crystalline hands, not in fear, but in acknowledgement. A new pack was forming, right there in the ruins of the council floor. But as this unity grew, so did the shadow. Somewhere beyond those stars, the general was already moving, already rallying his armies, already planning the next strike. And the Arbiter knew it too. Its gavel struck once more, tone like fractured glass. "The council stands divided. Humanity is affirmed, but peace is not secured. Prepare yourselves, for the next session may not be fought with words." The human delegate gave no speech, no victory cry. He only turned to his allies, his wolves, his new pack. "Then we'll do what humans have always done," he murmured. "We'll adapt. We'll endure. And when the storm breaks, we won't face it alone." The wolf growled low, its golden eyes catching the starlight. The galaxy was beginning to understand. Humanity didn't stand alone in the dark. Humanity brought the light and the pack that followed it. Far from the council chamber, beyond the gilded walls of politics and fragile unity, the general's warship drifted like a wounded predator in the black. His once proud banners had been torn from the chamber walls, his authority stripped in front of every delegate. But humiliation was not defeat. It was fuel. In the silence of his private sanctum, he stood before a projection of the council floor, replaying the moment that haunted him. The humans standing unflinching, the wolves flanking him, the word that still burned through the general's mind: pack. His talons flexed, leaving deep grooves in the metal floor. "They cheer for weakness," he snarled to his loyal officers. "They mistake fear for strength. They think an animal's growl and a human's arrogance can replace centuries of order. They are wrong." The officers shifted uneasily. Even among his loyalists, doubt was spreading. They had seen the wolves' eyes. They had felt the weight of the silence that followed their growl. Some part of them, primitive, buried deep, had recognized the danger. But the general pressed on, his voice iron and venom. "We will not fight them in chambers of words. We will not bow to theatrics. We will remind them what true power looks like. If they have a pack, then we will become the storm that scatters it." His fleet flickered into the projection, thousands of ships aligning in disciplined formation. He was no longer a voice within the council. He was now the shadow looming over it. Back on the council world, whispers reached the humans' ears before the Arbiter's formal announcement. The general had begun his campaign, raiding border colonies, burning neutral stations, striking at the very fringes where the council's influence was weakest. The Arbiter's voice cracked across the chamber. "This is no longer a matter of politics. The general declares war not only on humanity, but on all who would stand with it. This council must decide. Do we face him together or fall apart one by one?" For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Fear, as the general intended, rippled through the hall. Then the human stood. He didn't deliver a speech. He simply whistled, sharp and commanding. The wolves rose as one, their eyes gleaming, their presence a reminder of the promise already made. The human's voice carried steady, unshaken. "He has his fleet. We have our pack. Let him come." And in that moment, something shifted. The galaxy felt it. A line had been drawn, not of blood or species, but of choice. To stand with the general or to stand with the pack. The storm was coming. and humanity had already shown how it faced storms. Never alone. The void had never been so loud. The general's fleet surged across the border like a tidal wave, plasma fire lighting the dark as stations crumbled and colonies burned. His strategy was merciless: strike quick, sow terror, leave nothing behind but silence and ash. The Council's response was slow, tangled in fear and debate. But the humans were not waiting. Their ships, smaller and fewer, moved with the precision of hunters, cutting through the chaos not to match the general's numbers, but to disrupt, to bite at weak points. And then the wolves came. They were not strapped into war machines or armored in steel. Instead, they padded onto human decks as though born to them, stationed beside gunners, pilots, and engineers. Their ears twitched to sounds humans could not hear. Their eyes picked out movement humans missed. They became an extension of the crew, a living sensor network bound by instinct and trust. When the general's raiders struck a frontier outpost, they expected easy prey. Instead, they found human ships waiting, their wolves alert long before scanners pinged the ambush. The battle was chaos. Fire streaking across black, metal tearing into metal. But amid the storm, the pack worked as one. A wolf's growl warned of boarding before alarms sounded. Another's bark guided a blinded gunner to strike true. And when enemy soldiers forced their way into a human vessel, they were met not by frightened prey, but by fangs, fury, and unshakable loyalty. Word spread faster than fire in dry grass. The general's fleet had not crushed them, it had been bloodied by them. And worse, the story carried a chilling detail, that it was not just humans who had fought back, but the pack. Among alien ranks, unease grew. Soldiers muttered in mess halls, whispering about the wolves with eyes like cold fire. Captains hesitated at orders to engage. For the first time, the general's aura of inevitability cracked. Yet the general himself did not waver. From the bridge of his flagship, he stared at the battle reports, lips curling into something between a snarl and a smile. So, the beasts bite harder than expected, he murmured. Good, then let us see how long their teeth hold against fire. He ordered his fleet to escalate, to burn deeper into council space. No more raids, no more intimidation. This was no longer about showing power, this was about annihilation. Back on the council world, the Arbiter convened an emergency assembly. The chamber, once a place of words, was now a place of dread. All eyes turned again to the humans. The human delegate stood calmly, wolves arrayed at his side, their breathing steady in the tense air. He has made his choice, the human said, and so must we. He believes strength comes from fear. We know it comes from trust, from unity, from the pack. And then, with deliberate silence, the wolves lifted their heads and howled. The sound echoed through the chamber, primal and undeniable. The choice was before the galaxy: to scatter or to stand together. The first skirmish was over. The war had only begun. The general unleashed his fury like a storm breaking its chains. His fleet no longer crept along borders. It thundered into the heart of council space, tearing through defenses meant for diplomacy, not war. Planets lit the night sky with fire as orbital stations cracked apart, raining debris across once peaceful cities. To his soldiers, he was a vision of inevitability. Every defeat was erased by 3 more victories. Every setback was buried beneath the roar of engines and the flash of plasma cannons. He wanted the galaxy to feel not just conquered, but crushed. Yet in his drive forward, he did not see the subtle pattern forming in the shadows. The humans, scattered though they were, did not resist him with brute force. They resisted with intent. Each skirmish they chose was deliberate, each retreat calculated. The wolves sensed weaknesses before scanners registered them, leading ships into ambushes and disrupting supply lines. To the general's mind, it was madness. Why fight where you cannot win? Why bleed in places that gain you nothing? But to the humans, the logic was clear. They weren't fighting for territory. They were fighting for time. Because time meant whispers could spread. Time meant more species began to doubt his invincibility. Time meant the story of the pack reached even those under his rule. At first, his officers dismissed the rumors. Wolves that sensed ships in the void? Wolves that could turn the tide of battle? Absurd. But then reports trickled in. Battalions ambushed in perfect silence, convoys disrupted without a trace, entire strike forces routed by foes who seemed to anticipate every move. And when soldiers returned shaken, speaking of beasts with eyes that glowed in the dark corridors of captured ships, the myth became harder to ignore. The general laughed when he heard these tales, a laugh that rattled the steel of his command chair. "They fear stories," he told his captains. "Good. Let them choke on their fear until they cannot breathe. We will burn their myths along with their homes." But far from his throne of war, the humans gathered with their allies in secret chambers lit by dim lights and sharper hopes. The wolves lay at their feet, alert, restless, as if they too sensed the fragile balance. The human delegate spoke quietly, his voice carrying more weight than shouted proclamations. "He believes we scatter when pressed. He believes his fire can outpace our endurance. But he does not understand. He has already made his greatest mistake." Silence pressed in as alien eyes narrowed, waiting. "He has turned the galaxy's fear against him. He has made us a pack." The words struck deeper than any speech of strategy. And as the wolves rose one by one and padded closer to the circle, even the most cautious among the council began to see it. The humans were not alone. None of them were, if they chose not to be. The escalation had begun, but so too had something far more dangerous to the general than fleets or weapons: unity. The galaxy had seen war before. Fleets colliding, worlds burning, species erased from the records of history. But what began now was not war. It was something older, something buried deep in instincts that no civilization could fully erase. The pack was moving. It started small. Isolated outposts reported sudden strikes, their communications cut, their supply routes shredded. Patrols vanished into the void, never returning. When wreckage was found, it carried the marks not of weapons alone, but of precision. Teeth in the seams, claws in the hulls, sabotage so meticulous it felt less like war and more like a predator dismantling prey. At first, the general dismissed it. Guerrilla strikes, desperate humans clawing at inevitability. But then he realized the rhythm had changed. His armies no longer advanced at will. His fleets no longer struck without warning. Every move he made was shadowed. Every step was mirrored. The council worlds, once fractured and hesitant, began to respond in unison. Alien captains who had once looked down on humans now awaited their signals. Colonies that had been left undefended suddenly stood fortified. The wolves no longer guarded only humans. They guarded everyone who chose to stand with them. And in that solidarity, fear transformed. It became defiance. When the general launched his grand assault against the council's central hub, he expected a slaughter. What he found instead was a resistance unlike anything he had ever imagined. Human frigates darted in reckless patterns, baiting his cruisers into traps. Alien gunners fired in synchronicity with human spotters, every volley coordinated by the pack's uncanny instincts. And then came the wolves themselves, boarders slipping into his ships, sowing panic as shadows tore through soldiers who swore they'd never fear a beast. The general stood on his command deck, watching his flawless strategy unravel, and for the first time he felt something foreign creep into his chest. Not doubt, not defeat, something sharper, something that bit like cold: respect. Because what stood against him was not just a military coalition, it was not just politics or desperation, it was a pack. And in a pack, there is no surrender. He roared at his officers to push forward, to crush them with sheer weight of numbers. But as his words echoed in the bridge, a human transmission broke through the jamming fields, carried on frequencies his engineers swore were impossible to breach. The voice of the human delegate filled the chamber. "You thought we were alone. You thought you could break us by striking at the weakest. But here we stand, not as individuals, not even as nations. We stand as a pack. And the thing about a pack, General, is that it hunts." On cue, every screen lit up with wolf eyes, glowing and unblinking. His soldiers froze as though those eyes could see through the void, through steel, into their very bones. The general clenched his fists, his fury barely holding against the truth he could no longer deny. The galaxy was not breaking. The galaxy was circling, and the prey was him. The battle that followed was not a clash of fleets. It was a chase. The general's warships, vast and bristling with weapons, should have dominated the stars. But against the pack, their power meant nothing. Human frigates darted in like wolves nipping at a bear's heels, crippling engines, slicing off communication arrays. Alien cruisers, once hesitant allies, fell into formation around them, their fire timed like the heartbeat of a single organism. The pack wasn't just fighting, it was hunting. One by one, the general's ships broke away, trying to flee, but the pack never let them go. They herded them, funneled them, drove them exactly where they wanted. Every time the general thought he'd found a gap, every time he ordered his fleet to break through, another ambush awaited, ships materializing from nowhere, striking with uncanny precision. On his flagship, alarms screamed. Decks shook as explosions tore through its hull. The general bellowed for his crew to hold fast, to remember their discipline, to push back against the chaos. But his soldiers' eyes told the truth. They weren't looking at the enemy as just ships or fighters anymore. They were looking into the dark between the stars, and in that darkness they swore they saw eyes watching them, wolf eyes. And then the human transmission returned, calm, steady, merciless. "You asked who protects us. You asked why we don't bow when threatened. Now you understand. You see, we are never alone. We are never prey. We are the pack, and the pack does not forgive." The general's last gamble was desperation. He ordered his fleet into a full retreat, a disorderly scatter across the stars. But even then, the pack followed. Not to exterminate, but to dismantle, to corner, to prove that the predator was never him. When his flagship was finally boarded, the general fought like a beast, but he was only one body against many. And when the human delegate stepped onto his bridge, flanked by wolves, both human and beast, silence fell heavier than any weapon. The general stared, chest heaving, eyes wide as he finally saw it. Not weakness, not fragility, but the truth. Humans did not need to be the strongest. They did not need to be the fastest. They had something no other species could ever replicate. Unity, instinct, the bond of the pack. The human leaned close, voice low but carrying across the ruined bridge. "Remember this, General. The lone wolf falls, but the pack survives." The general lowered his head, not in submission, but in recognition. His war was over, not lost to strength, but to something far older and far deadlier. Because the galaxy had learned a lesson carved into the marrow of every species that ever stalked the wilds of their worlds. The most dangerous predator is never the one you see. It's the pack waiting just beyond the firelight. And now, the galaxy would never forget.